Okay, I'm going to kick us off. Welcome to the next in our series of our DIBs Media Perspectives. This is a quarterly series that we host. We've been hosting for the last, what, gosh, two and a half years. I'm really proud to be the executive sponsor of it. And essentially, the way it started, and it's interesting, it started as a media perspective series where we would invite members of the media really to keep the agency and our clients up to speed on what's happening in newsrooms and what the perspectives are from working journalists so that we weren't in a confined windowless conference room talking about the news cycle and not hearing directly from the newsmakers and those working in the news to inform our perspectives. We have since broadened it in two ways. Broadening it to beyond actual journalists like Hope to also communications professionals like Sarah and Nicole and Ivy who are working on the front lines because we've seen a blur between or emerging between what's happening in newsrooms and what's happening specifically in communications shops. I mean, the lines continue to blur. We also had added an additional element where we wanted to make sure that these conversations were conversations that were led by diverse audiences. And so in looking back on Women's History Month and looking back on and looking at AAPI Month, which we're currently in, we're celebrating that with this particular group. And with that, I'll toss it to my friend and colleague Ayana, who'll give a little bit more background on our dedication to this particular point of view.
Yes, I'm going to keep it short, but I just want to say thanks, Danny. And, we are super excited to host this conversation. It really aligns with our agency value, inclusion always. And really, as Danny alluded to, we're really trying to drill down on centering a rich tapestry of voices and perspectives by way of this initiative. So we appreciate you being part of this timely and important dialogue as we talked about sort of navigating on the heels of Women's History Month, fully embracing AAPI Heritage Month. So before we kick things off, I do want to remind this audience that we are going to have the chance to engage, have a little bit of interaction towards the latter part of this conversation. So there will be a 5-minute window. I know that's not a lot of time, but please, 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 as the conversation's percolating, if something resonates, you have questions, do feel free, excuse me, to just drop that into the chat. Without further ado, I am excited to introduce our first guest moderator, Hope. You're the first one to take it over from Danny. We're delighted to have you, contributor at Axios, Yahoo Finance. Happy to have you. Hope, over to you.
Thank you so much. I really love this initiative. Danny, thank you so much for your tireless work over the past couple of months putting this together. As a journalist, knowing that organizations are still dedicating time and energy into conversations like this is really meaningful. And so I just want to thank you and the entire Highwire team again. I'm also just really excited because I love talking to people who are doing really cool and exciting things. And this entire panel that I have today that Danny assembled for this event is exactly representative of the topics that are top of mind for consumers, for people in the media, and executives who are trying to change and shape the future. So would love for everyone just to quickly introduce themselves, your name, your title, and a quick intro about what you are doing day to day. I'll start with you, Ivy.
Yeah, thanks, Hope, and thank you, everyone. And Danny, as Hope said, thanks for arranging this and inviting me to participate on this panel. Super excited. My name's Ivy Choi. My pronouns are she, her, and I lead policy and product communications at Pinterest, which is a visual search platform for inspiration and positivity. In this role, I'm really focused on telling Pinterest product innovation and policy priorities at a global level. We are a global company after all. So very excited to come and answer any questions and really talk with this really, really wonderful group of panelists. And I'll
Awesome.
turn it over to you, Nicole.
Hi, thanks, Ivy. Yeah, just wanted to express also my gratitude for this great opportunity to be on this panel with a group of amazing women. So, hi, my name is Nicole Kim. I'm VP Marketing at Arcee AI, which is a newer Series A tech startup. My pronouns are she, her. I spent the last 20 plus years in tech, 18 with large software companies, and so more recently in the past 3 years now, back with startups, tech startups. And specifically, I seem to have this affinity for Series A AI startups. I must love chaos. I started out with traditional tech company product marketing. And then, within the last decade or so, I've been really fortunate to find opportunities where I have explored roles in exec comms, brand strategy events, AR, PR work across the board. So right now, just overseeing all of marketing. Recently, let's see, I have been learning to embrace what life at 50 looks like, and anticipating what the house will feel like when my kids leave for college. Also, I am in San Francisco. I started this journey back in 97 of eating my way through San Francisco, both savories and sweets. So the great thing about San Francisco that it is an endless journey because there's always new places to discover. And with that, I will pass it over to Sarah.
I lead global marketing and comms for Quantum Black. It is the AI practice of McKinsey and Company, a professional services firm. We have 1,000 technologists and product managers affiliated with our practice in 50 countries, and we serve Fortune 500 companies, heads of states, on how to rewire their organizations using AI. My day-to-day is focused on a sort of full funnel marketing strategy, also corporate comms, how do you manage the brand, etc. And I started my career in journalism as a reporter and editor. Happy to be here.
I know. I was sad to see that you were sucked over to the dark side, Sarah, but you are still a partner to us journalists. I have great respect for all comms professionals. You do make my job easier, I will say. I mean, I can't possibly keep track of everything that's going on. So I love working with folks like you and Ivy and Nicole. I think because we are in this moment right now, and just thank you everyone for making the time. I know there's so much going on in the world, and there's a Fed decision and breaking news that you're spending your time today with us is really meaningful. And just Sarah, I want to start with you. Just given everything that you said, if you had to really narrow down your top priorities, what would you say are the specific stories and messages that are most important for your organization to share externally, and why?
With Quantum Black, or the ethos of QB, in a very saturated space, as everyone knows here, is around the concept of hybrid intelligence. And so it's this question of, so now AI is here, we're moving from POC to production. And so what does that mean for humanity? And what does AI actually enable people to do? And so the spirit of sort of what we're trying to capture is one, of course, you need a human in the loop for anything you're doing. But secondly, it's like this idea of AI sort of unleashes the human spirit in a different way. And it enables us to sort of be the best version of ourselves, or a different version of ourselves that we perhaps didn't have time for before. Or, I do think that there's the spirit that comes with being forced to upskill yourself. And so this is kind of the focus of how we humanize AI outside of, we're a professional services firm, so we are squarely focused on helping an organization's P&L and improving that using AI. But on the other side of that, this is the kind of marketing and communication story that I'm sort of most interested in outside of the business side of it.
Yeah, I love this idea of unleashing kind of the human spirit. I mean, aside from anxiety, what other human spirits are coming out in this moment that you are trying to convey, but also really to help organizations rewire around? Because, amid the backdrop of just that kind of like nervousness and also like a lot of noise, like to your point, what are some of the tactics really that you have found to be most successful in getting these strategies across?
So in my role, it depends on what your KPIs are, and it depends on how you're measuring impact, and then you use different tactics for what you're trying to achieve. If I'm trying to achieve like how many people, like the top of the funnel brand awareness, like how many people can I get something like this in front of? Then if the question is like what types of stories land, it's always going to be the human stories, because it's it's for the gen pop. But as I go down the funnel, if I'm interested in conversion, let's say, then the stories that are going to be most interesting and the case studies, if you go to our website, you'll see we have all of these case studies, are actually how we're bringing to life all of the work we're doing for these Fortune 500 companies. So it really depends on the audience, and then we segment from there, and then we have a sort of full go-to-market approach. But typically, I try to figure out like what am I trying to achieve, who is the audience, and then you work backwards from there. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, and I think Nicole,
Yeah.
I think you're probably somebody who is also in that space, headspace of having the Gen Pop, and then also having the companies that you're working with to help them. So would love to ask you the same questions. What are your top priorities right now?
So my perspective is a bit different from Sarah's, being in kind of the thick of it, and just to what Sarah was alluding to, the pace of innovation that's happening in the tech. It's so crazy. So as a marketer, a comms person, coming from my perspective, it's just really about staying relevant in this cluttered, competitive landscape. And obviously just from a being very research forward, like to be curious, and then ultimately, because you don't have time, to ever get comfortable, right? And that's a good thing because that's the driving factor and motivator and always pushing the company to create new boundaries for, where we're trying to achieve and get to from an end deliverable perspective. So really, it's just to stay relevant, be curious, never get comfortable. And really just, for the AI space. And I mean, like with true AI, not existing in a software that is using AI and calling it AI forward, because there are really these kind of two categories where existing tech tries to say, oh, we're AI, but it's just something that's tacked on or they're using a model of some sort. And then the true innovators in this space that are driving these, to go from large language models, small language models. Now we have diffusion models. We have things like MCP. There's new acronyms coming out all the time. So really for the pioneers that are pushing that research to become a reality, redefining those boundaries, that's what can be defined as what we would call operational norms. That's really what's important in making that innovation credible and applicable, demonstrating impact that ultimately can translate into business efficiencies. And it's about establishing, that positioning through messaging and branding.
Yeah, and Ivy, I imagine, as Nicole was talking about tech companies that add AI, I hope you weren't feeling like it was some sort of shade. I mean, but Pinterest is, a big tech company largely now, like also using AI tools. You guys just released visual language models, which is a lot about personalization so that, people can find things through images. I would love for you to kind of put all these ideas together as a very much kind of consumer facing brand of how to tell the AI story right now. If you are not, in Nicole's space squarely building sort of the AI, and if you're not in Sarah's space specifically helping companies rewire themselves.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And no shade detected, Nicole, no worries.
Thank you.
I think from Pinterest's end, we're really looking at how to use AI technology to improve the experience for our users and advertisers externally, but also making sure that we're using these tools to make sure that we are moving more efficiently internally so that we can deliver better and faster for our users, advertisers, and creators as well. So Hope, what you were alluding to, and for those that aren't familiar, earlier this week, we announced a series of visual search features that help people kind of discover and shop more intuitively, even when they don't necessarily have the words to describe what they're looking for, right? And one of the reasons why we specifically started with women's fashion is because it's really hard to find the words to describe something like cherry coated or moto boho, right? And these features help you kind of personalize your search and discovery experience so that you can discover styles that maybe you didn't even know that you liked. So that's really what we're focused on. And these features leverage our multimodal visual refinement technology, which include our visual language models. And that leverages Gen AI to provide users with this like rich personalized search experience that really only Pinterest can deliver, given our 15 plus years of being a company. But this isn't kind of, you know, anything, it's building on our existing work, right? We last year or in the last few years, we launched a suite of inclusive AI features. For example, our body type ranges feature. So if you go on Pinterest and you're looking for certain types of fashion, you might see a tool at the top that you can click on that has a range of body types that you can really click and see what works for you. That is built on our body type technology. So continuing to kind of continue to innovate and really stay on track with what's new and keeping on top of it so that we can best deliver for our users and advertisers and creators. That's really ultimately our focus as a business.
Yeah, I think for a lot of people who understand the value of Pinterest, it's, you know, that inspiration board. It's really, it gives people that canvas to imagine the possibilities of whether it's their outfits or their home. And I think, as you guys already know, you're kind of like the arbiter of cool. If people who are referencing it online, that's where they're usually referencing is Pinterest. Now, all of you sort of touched upon this a little bit, so I want to go a little bit deeper, which is the velocity and volume of news right now that is really drowning consumers, it's drowning journalists, it's drowning you guys. Is it even possible anymore to sort of trend jack? How do you really stay aligned with the current news cycle, or is that even part of your strategy? Do you want to actually program against?
You know, I may just say one thing. Like McKinsey is known, we have a publishing machine. If you may have heard of our multiple think tanks, Economic Mobility Institute, McKinsey Global Institute. So we have a whole publishing arm where all we do is bespoke research and publish, and we're cited all the time. So this concept of newsjacking, it's very familiar, and also we're watching it and often setting the trends. The hot topic right now is geopolitics. And so if you even just go to our website, you'll see that we just are publishing a ton. And even when the DeepSeek memo came out, I mean, that I can't emphasize enough how much we sort of, it's just always with the lens of like, how is this going to impact a business or a government? Because as soon as tariffs is in the news 24/7, CEOs will call us and say, okay, so what are the implications? How do I think about this? And so it's very, very top of mind for a professional services firm like ours. And so I just personally read the news constantly. And we work hand in hand with like our reputation risk function and things like that. So it's just, I have like subscriptions to every single outlet on the planet. It's like, that's how I start my morning.
It sounds like it's very much product driven too on your business side when they feel the need to jump in. And I will say, I will give you guys a lot of credit. As a journalist, I go on your blogs all the time. You know, I always need an expert voice and research. And so I find blogs to be very valuable. I've said this on other calls with Highwire folks. I think it's incredibly instrumental in not only establishing credibility, but showing that you already are in the space, thinking about these issues ahead of time to give not only the guidance for your clients, but also, again, for consumers to rely on something that's very credible. So I just want to give you guys a shout out there. For Ivy and for Nicole, the same kind of question. I mean, when you're trying to launch a product in this environment, Ivy, like it feels like it's very difficult to find the right timing. Do you guys just ignore everything that's kind of going on? Or do you actually kind of watch the space and say, hey, look, we got a Fed decision. Maybe we don't talk about it this week. Maybe we talk about it, you know, not during the jobs week. How do you think about the time?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we, of course, follow the current news cycle really, really closely. I mean, I feel like there's something new every few seconds. I think the conclave is picking a new pope now. So the news cycle is absolutely wild. So of course we try to stay on top of the latest. But I think ultimately, and Sarah, I think this is probably where we differ a bit from McKinsey. Pinterest obviously has a core focus around being a visual search platform, and we're really serving ultimately one business and one audience, which is our which is Pinterest's users. So for us, what we're really focused on is to continue to build and expand what's unique to us and what our unique offerings are, and centering ourselves around positivity and inspiration, and prioritizing that. But that said, of course, like if we see something in the news, we'll take that into account and take a step back and see how we need to adjust our strategy. I think like Sarah, I'm subscribed to, every other news service on the planet because it's really important to keep track of that. And every morning, like one of the first things that I do besides make coffee is like catch up on my phone, like scroll through Axios and the New York Times and look at my Politico newsletter to see what's going on in DC. But I think like I really rely on the aggregation and personally keeping up with the news. But I think at the end of the day, both personally and professionally, I'm not trying to quote unquote keep pace because I think given the speed at this point, that is almost an impossible task. Instead, I try to, for lack of a better phrase, I try to go with the flow, which is actually one of the best pieces of professional and personal advices that I've gotten, because when you work in comms, you know this, there and media as well, Hope, there's always going to be these twists and turns, and you can try and game it out as best as possible, but there's always going to be a surprise, even when the cycle isn't moving as quickly as it is today. So for me, like stressing is counterintuitive. Like you can't fight the unexpected. So instead, you just stay flexible, you assess the situation, and then, come with the changes and figure out how to best execute. So that's ultimately the way that I've found to best approach, especially with everything that's going on in the world these days.
I love that. And Nicole, I would love for you to add to this, but also, you have a very fascinating background. You mentioned before, you've been like a tech lifer. I mean, you've worked in a role where you've also managed corporate and product marketing, brand management, PR, and analyst relation strategy all in one. So I'm curious, as we're talking about sort of the news cycle, but also audience fragmentation, I would love for you to kind of share your own tips and tricks and tactics on whether or not all these audiences actually need the same message, or do we still need to sort of tailor the messages, again, because everybody is being thrown into this sort of volume of news?
I actually, not to be a smart ass, but by the way, you can use agentic AI workflows to build a news aggregator so that you don't have to go to all those different sites. You can customize it. Just saying, like, that's the future. We have a customer that we built a whole workflow around so that they can deliver that customized per customer of theirs. So anyways, from a tech perspective, so I was listening to all of you. I'm like, we can solve that. Anyways, but yes.
Wait, can you actually solve that? Because I would love that myself as somebody who has all the subscriptions. You should do like a follow-up demo of how to build this, and then you can save us all a lot of time. So thank you for that plug.
There will be a demo video coming out soon then with that use case. But I was going to say, with the onslaught of this era of social media and shortened attention spans, and like I see this with my kids, the need for instant gratification all the time, right? And a minimum requirement that in order to have my attention, I must be entertained kind of mind frame, especially coming out of COVID, right? Everything had to be entertaining. So we're finding, in order for us, we are not an established name brand like Pinterest or McKinsey for that matter as well. So cutting through all the noise, it's really hard. So your writing, your videos, your webinar topics, they have to be that much more compelling. Your hooks have to be sassier, funnier, whatever is the tone that represents your company, maybe even more controversial in which to reach your end users. So for us, it's really also about knowing, like, who is our ICP for today? Who is our ideal customer profile? Who's the buyer persona that we are trying to reach? And knowing that they are in the same situation as what Sarah and Ivy and you guys have all mentioned, like you're trying to get their attention and cut through the noise. So it's it's one of these things where I'll give you an example, like a simple product launch announcement. In the past, it would have been just that, right? A simple product launch announcement. But now we are beholden to the algorithms of social media. So there is a need for, let's say, like a launch video. And oh, by the way, that launch video needs to be animated and has to be short with very little words, with great music, and lands the message with an incentivized CTA. So packaging all that just, as a marketer is challenging us to be that much more creative about how we reach our audience, which I don't think is a bad thing, right? You strain your brain to really to get it out there and be effective. Another thing I will say post-COVID, which seems like a long time ago, but still, because I see the impact of it with my teenagers and their inability to be as social as like my daughter who's much younger, is in-person events. And so that is still definitely a thing. We just threw an event downtown in San Francisco with one of our partners, Amazon Web Services, at their loft space. And, like we included a dinner, which, by the way, rated highly in our survey results, right? It's a thing. But instead of just doing a presentation or a talk, or even just like a hands-on workshop, which is all the usual, right? Or even like doing a hackathon, what we decided to do is we positioned it for a build-a-thon, right? With a not yet released. So it's enticing, a sneak preview of a new product. And every person that gets to be a part of this event walks away with the ability to say they did something that they would have never done before without engaging in buying an enterprise level like product, and that's building an agentic AI workflow, right? So they had the opportunity to do that. By the way, we formatted it in a timed competition. We actually also put a Squid Games theme on top of it. So again, it's like whatever is out of left field, usual, unusual, unique, is attractive. We had max capacity registration, like people wanted to come out, and it was a Monday night. So something to be said about being back in person. I think events are back roaring. Lots of tech events are back at full capacity. I know like ServiceNow is having their big marquee event, and I know they're hitting it out of the park. So yeah, something to be said about being extra unique, going the extra mile, and doing things back in person.
I'm glad you brought up events as somebody who hosts a lot of events in person as well. I mean, I see it, I see the energy, and you have a very engaged audience and a very intentional one who are really spending the time and energy to be out there. Ivy, you've been nodding a lot as Nicole was talking. Are events part of the strategy now, do you think, for communications?
Yeah, I mean, they've always been part of the strategy, right? Executives at, big speaking events, being on panels, talking about their perspective and representing the company. But I also do agree with Nicole, there is value to be in person. So as people are coming back, and going to places like Coachella, for example, right? So for a little bit of context, Gen Z is actually Pinterest's largest and fastest growing demographic. And this group, they don't rely necessarily always on traditional media to get their news and information. So one of the things, and this dovetails into what you were talking about with events, Nicole, one of the things that we've really been doing is working and building out a space, building out a function to work with new media. So you're thinking podcasts, you're thinking content creators, right? All of the places that Gen Z goes to these days to get what they want. So earlier this year, we actually had an activation at Coachella, and the team that was working on that actually didn't only pitch traditional media like your Ad Age and Hollywood Reporters of the world and inviting journalists, all very traditional. But because Coachella is such a Gen Z and in-person event, we actually had this big activation. That was created by Chapel Roan's creative director, a very Gen Z friendly artist. And we tapped creators such as Styled with Jules and partnered with this thrifting stylist, KJ Lillian, to create fun and engaging content that resonates with this younger user base that makes up so much of who uses Pinterest. So I think we'll continue to not only look at, throwing our own events, but continuing to figure out, where it makes sense to have Pinterest's presence and really amplifying that not only through traditional methods, but also through this world of new media, especially given how fragmented the landscape is.
I
Yeah,
think
I love to.
Oh,
Go
I was
ahead.
going to say,
No, go ahead,
the key
Nicole.
thing is like experiential has always been a factor, but it's moved up in the level of priority and in what we're doing now. So
I love that. That's more work for me also. As somebody who has her foot on the independent side as well as the legacy side still. Sarah, I don't know if McKinsey's ever going to go to Coachella. I imagine maybe one day you'd want to find some way to activate, but how do you choose where you want to be when it comes to events?
That's a great question. I mean, events is a core part of my comm strategy. We are at every major sort of tech event, whether it's Viva Tech coming up in Europe or Davos, we're just at Milken and things like that. Um, so how do we decide? I mean, it depends. It depends on if you're just trying to land brand awareness, which is fine. I mean, anyway, all of it will touch on brand awareness regardless if you're there for a singular speaking role or you have brand marketing, like logos and things like that. Typically, we also host hundreds of our own CXO events a year. And, the first question I always ask, and we are also much more, compared to our competitors, we're much more conservative. Like, we don't have, billboards in the airport yet. So the first question we ask is like, who's in the room and does this organization have convening power that we don't already? So what is the value add in partnering with X company at this event versus doing it ourselves? And so fundamentally this, and we're a 100-year-old organization. We're celebrating our centennial next year. So we have all of those relationships and things like that. But to Nicole's point, it's just everything is so saturated. And fall season has always been the craziest time. It's like now is the busiest time leading into end of June and then fall. And it's like the bar for these events is so high. I mean, like right now I'm at an internal summit meeting with 200 of my colleagues in North America. I am very keen externally when we convene clients. I actually really like the micro summit movement, the smaller event movement, CXO dinners. Because often, even if you think about like just a larger scale event, super cool, you have huge speakers come. It's just difficult to have that sort of one-to-one client development or connections in a curated type of way. And so you don't always need that, but typically if there's an investment involved, you want to just make sure that you're being thoughtful and strategic across all elements. So that's kind of how I think about it. And I mean, I'm a huge fan of these sort of CXO dinners. And if I can partner with an organization who has that convening power, typically I find it in the Bay Area, just given what we're doing with Quantum Black. That's awesome. It's like so beneficial to me.
Yeah, I like that. It gives me some food for thought as somebody who hosts these dinners with Axios and also in these smaller micro summits that I think that you call, which is, I think is a very cool term. But the partner, it sounds like, if I'm hearing you correctly, they really need to bring something very different because you already have such great convening power. So I don't know. I feel like Coachella would be the only kind of convening power you couldn't get on your own for that audience. As we move over to the Q&A section quickly, in the next couple of minutes, I would love to just encourage people to drop the questions into the chat to kind of start a queue as we enter the last segment of our moderated portion. And that really is to kind of get a little bit more personal with your own careers and journeys, but also as AI is impacting all of us in our jobs. Would love to just understand how each of you are future-proofing your jobs and how you feel you need to maybe change your roles and what you feel like that role would look like, 5 years from today. And I think, Ivy, I'll start with you just because you moved from big tech now to Pinterest. You were at Google and YouTube for a while. And so you've seen how these big tech companies move and how quickly they can actually push change across the spectrum. So just again, the question of how you are future-proofing your own job and what you think your role will look like in 5 years.
Yeah. So I think the role, even when I think about when I like first started my career, communications just continues to evolve. And I think the importance and the influence that we have within our organizations has only really gotten greater, especially with especially in the age of AI. Because AI is really great for expediting and efficiency and using tools to maybe like incorporate automation so that you aren't spending as much time in your tactical work. But in return, you have a lot more bandwidth and ability to become really strategic and become that strategic partner and provide guidance, whether it's around reputation management, whether it's around looking at new ways to incorporate and approach major moments like traditional product launches, right? So for me, as I moved from Google to Pinterest, I look back and it's really less about like moving from big tech to a mid-sized tech company, but more about the point in my career in which I'm making that move. And I'm evolving not only personally, but also professionally. So I remember when I made the switch from agency to in-house way back in the day, and it was like I was almost starting from scratch because I was learning this whole new way of approaching communications because there's a difference between in-house and agency. And I spent the bulk of my formative years of my career learning the ropes at Google and really learning from professionals that have been around the block and experiencing situations and working on projects that maybe I wouldn't have been able to anywhere else. And at Pinterest, now I'm able to take all of those lessons that I learned and really apply them at scale and helping to operationalize, the product and policy communications work for a company that's growing and becoming more and more sophisticated. So when I look at kind of how I've evolved and taking my lessons, one of the ways that I'm really future-proofing my role, for lack of a better description, is really incorporating data analytics. So I think in the past communications, there wasn't really, at least in my experience, that much focus on measurement and showing metrics and beyond, we have this number of articles and this much of messaging pull through. But now, especially with AI, we're able to explore better ways to incorporate data analytics to not only communicate externally, so pulling metrics from our platform like trends and really sharing that with folks like you, Hope, but also internally with stakeholders so that we're helping to not only tell, but we're able to show and also defend the work that we do every day and where our strategic guidance is coming from.
I love that point about data. And I just really quickly on this before I pass it over to Nicole for the same question. I have seen many more pitches in my inbox around surveys that companies are putting out. Is this sort of the new norm? Is that, I think what you said is to kind of prove and show like the evidence of the need of your product and services?
Yeah, I think surveys are always a really great way. But the feedback that I've actually gotten from press before is that it's really internal data, that unique set of data that your platform can provide. So, for example, at Pinterest, every year we publish this thing called Pinterest Predicts, which is essentially a using our own internal classifiers and metrics. We share with advertisers and users the trends that will be taking place in the coming year. So for example, in last year's report, we had in 2025, we're going to see a lot more of Moto Boho and Cherry Coated, which is that like deep red color that color is really going to resonate with folks. So I think surveys are really great. They've always been a really great tool to really support, your messaging. But I think more and more it'll behoove organizations to really look at kind of what is the unique unique metrics and data that you can put out that really highlight the unique offerings of your platform or your service.
I love that. Nicole, you are, I think, someone who just likes to build. I mean, I think that's why you go for Series A. You like to be there at the beginning. So let's say in 5 years, we'll talk to you again. You'll be at another Series A. What do you think your job will look like then?
I was going to say, like, just kind of, I wanted to dovetail off of what Ivy was saying about, humans still matter. And we, in AI, we have this, people are kicking around the whole human in the loop, right? AI is great. You still need a human in the loop. It's the same with what's happening with strategic comms and media relations today. Like, AI does not currently replace humans and what they bring to the table, which is their brand presence. So yeah, there are avatars, there are AI identities, but really for now, the true human thought and opinions are still valued by, the audience. And so think about like influencers. Like for me, it's like tech influencers, prominent names in journalisms with, specific pubs. There's tech luminaries that everybody clamors to listen to, like influential speakers that are being still sought after to help amplify brand products and messaging. So for me, like I still see that as being a priority and is important. And there's something to be said about, going back to when we were talking about our priorities, right? The be curious part. There's always more to be learned, right? New tools to try, different channels to experiment with. But really, especially on the tools part, as AI aims to keep simplifying our jobs in the name of efficiency, it's really good to stay adept and aware and relevant in all the tool sets that are coming out today. So there's still something to be said about for me also the value of experience, right? Both depth and breadth that myself or anyone can bring to the table to safeguard against and to really like counterbalance rash decision making, and a bias for action in a way that is without thoughtfulness. So I see that a lot with, that's happening with small tech startups. So there's something to be said about that. So I feel like there is value in the experience that you can bring, but also staying very willing to learn and embrace the new tech in a way that will be supplemental to your value that you bring to the table.
I like that. Always stay hungry. Sarah, you've grown up inside of McKinsey now for most of your professional career. As you mentioned, how do you see your role evolving?
What the way that I think about my role is what can I do now that AI cannot do in 5 years? And I would recommend anyone in any industry should be thinking like this. And it's a tough question. I mean, I can't tell you exactly how because the pace of change is so significant that I literally cannot predict what I will or will not be doing in 5 years. I do know that I have to keep trying to keep up. And I also know that I was a reporter and I studied journalism and the sort of the value in softer skills and the value in depth and influencing skills and how you literally communicate and talk and presence and these things are going to be even more critical. I mean, think about how technical all of this stuff is that we're putting out there and how do you actually distill it down and communicate it and essentially also convince people to hire you in such a saturated space. So I think this is always going to be so critical in our role. I can speak confidently maybe for the next year. I don't know, man, if these AI things will like become super sentient and like can think like me. I just don't know in 5 years what it'll look like. Um, but I do think about this all the time. And I really try to focus my day to day on things that only I can do versus things that the tech can do. And if the tech can do it and I just haven't learned yet, then this is also how I prioritize my time and focus my day.
So you don't see a future where marketers have to learn how to code?
I don't know, maybe. I mean, I just went to a conference the other day where an AI luminary said, I'm getting to the point where I won't hire a marketer in 2 years who doesn't know how to code. Maybe, maybe. But that I
I
just
mean,
don't have yeah.
no,
don't know.
I love the openness, right? Like you're not gonna project beyond 6 months, probably even. I bring this up also because Nicole, I think you had mentioned somewhere in our call and maybe even online that you at one point were going to GitHub repos. and really trying to figure out, what some of the coders and developers were doing. So I throw the same question to you. How important is even computer science to a marketer right now as a skill?
I mean, I think it all goes back to your ability to resonate with your audience and how much you'll need to know, right? There's nothing worse than somebody dismissing your messaging because it's fluffy. It has no hooks. It has nothing that will resonate with what they're doing on their day to day. So, I mean, it's always, you have to be customer centric, right? And understand their POV and what is it that their pain points and challenges are. And if it's something where you can strike a chord because you get like their challenge and pain point, and I'm talking from a technical angle, that's really, I think, so enough to be dangerous. You don't have to know how to create it from scratch, build it, or bug fix it, but enough to understand that the benefit aspect of what you're creating. And hopefully it's this feedback loop, right? This flywheel that you're building these features and capabilities because you know that they're existing pain points because you've gotten that through feedback. It's like typical.
Yep.
That's nothing new. And it still holds true today.
But I just wanted to call that out because I do think, the fact that you had brought up at some point, I think calls to attention to your own efforts to connect with that audience in a way where they respect you at the table, whereas they're not seeing as you as just this marketing person coming in and trying to tell you what the story is, but that you actually truly understand the product. So I do think that's really important, and I applaud you for doing that. We have two questions in the chat. Before we wrap, with one last question for me. One question from Megan: how are you balancing in-person events against other comm priorities? Are they higher up now on the list compared to pre-COVID? Ivy, I'll start with you and then go to Sarah.
So I don't mean for this to be like a cop-out. I'm a policy person, so nuance is really important. So I think it really depends on what you're on your message, what your OKRs are, what success looks like. So it's tough to answer that question without all of those details, because there are going to be launches where an in-person event is just isn't worth the ROI, right? But there are also going to be in-person events where it does make sense, and it makes sense to make a big splash and invite people in person. For example, if you're launching hardware, maybe you want to bring people in so that they can experience that firsthand. For Pinterest Predicts, last year we held an in-person event at our New York City office where people could experience the trends themselves. We had one of the trends that we had was the focus on pickles. People are really into pickles this year. So we had like pickle flavored cupcakes and pickle sandwiches. Hope, I guess you're not a fan of pickles.
No, I love it. I guess I'm like, what is the underlying feeling? Are people like just so sour about their life that they just start eating their feelings literally? Like, I'm looking into this after this. I love this story too.
Exactly. So for stuff like that, it makes sense to throw these in-person events and helping people experience. But then there are other things where maybe it's a straightforward product launch and it doesn't make sense to have an in-person event. Also with executive time, right? We had Bill Reddy, our CEO, went to Davos earlier this year, where he shared his perspective for the first time as the first tech CEO to come out in support of phone-free school policies. And he's there because it makes sense for him to be present with those key opinion formers and policymakers. But there might be other events that doesn't make sense for him to be in. So it really, really depends, I found, on what your ultimate goals are and what you're trying to achieve. So I know that again is like it's not necessarily the most straightforward answer, but I think it goes back to the fact that you wanna create unique and bespoke strategies that make sense for the moment.
Sarah, I'll fine tune the question a little bit for you. Are you allocating more dollars to events in general?
I wouldn't think about it like that if we're allocating more. I mean, I think events are just very critical, a critical part of any go-to-market strategy. You have to meet with your clients in person. And the only way I would characterize like how we think about the spikes is the fall is really saturated with events, and so is spring. But I mean, even just the tech event space is incredibly robust. And so it's very important that sort of companies show up and are part of that ecosystem as well. And so that's never really shifted. Of course, when COVID happened and everything sort of shut down, but I think we're fully back in swing since then. It seems like a lifetime ago at this point, but no, it's critical.
Nicole, anything to add on event side? I mean, I feel like as a journalist, I like going to events when I can be hands-on with a product that's new. And if you give me exclusive access to an executive, like then I'll be there. Like to me, as a journalist, I hate actually being behind my desk. I want to be out there. So the more events there are, I actually prefer it. Just my 2 cents. Nicole, really quickly before we move to the last question.
I was going to say, I think Hope's not asking me because she knows I work for a Series A and that we don't have budget for events. So I'm glad she gave the time to Sarah and Ivy.
I know it's still important. I will say, like I was at a LinkedIn event yesterday in the city. They had some new AI, so like that was cool to be there and talk to the chief economists as well. So I know it's expensive. It's logistically very involved. And like Robinhood, I mean, all these companies are launching their own version of like Apple WWDC. It's a very, very fascinating strategy when it comes to events. But again, back to them being engaged. All right, last audience question. How do you actually get your execs or stakeholders who may be more hesitant to be extra in their messages and risky? How do you actually win them over? Nicole, you might not have as hard of a time, I would imagine, because you are trying to break through, right, with that. But if they do kind of look at you sideways when you have a cookie idea, how do you win them over?
So I actually read the question a bit differently around raising the bar on creativity around messaging. And I think, yeah, you hit it on the nail. It's like with a Series A, everything goes. It's a little bit Wild West and chaotic, and it's really that underlying theme of experimental, right? Like, let's give it a try. If it fails, mark it off the list. Don't go there again. Let's try something else. So for us, like I said, we're in this age of experiential, opportunities and what we're doing. So as long as like our executives know we are leaning into who our audience is, we're taking into account like latest social media trends. There are some tried and true techniques that people still gravitate towards that we like to use, like doing things that are out of context and catching people by surprise. But the key thing is for someone to be learning while not realizing they're learning because they're being entertained or they're having fun. So anything like thinking about it in that kind of vein of thought and how we're doing it across different channels. So whether it is in a podcast or a webinar, how do we jazz it up? How do we like raise it up a notch so that people are they walk away saying, hey, that was really fun. And they're like, oh, wait, now I know how to do this, or I learned a little bit more about that. And it's like, now I feel like I'm caught up on some latest trends around, what's happening in the AI space.
That's incredibly insightful. I mean, just like putting vegetables into the, carrot cake or cupcakes as kind of the analogy to food. We're gonna have to leave it here, but I just want to wrap with one last question for you all. When you look back on your career, what strategies of the past no longer work and what will always stay true? Sarah, I'll start with you.
What no longer works and what was the second part?
And what strategies will always stay true and be effective?
The thing that is most critical to master, and I think always will, is influencing. And there's various different sort of influencing models, and how do you convince someone to give you budget or do something, etc. I think in this role, it's hyper critical. I can't see that shifting. What does not hold to be true? I don't know, like writing social media copy. Like you don't need to do that stuff anymore. I mean, I do. You need a human in the loop and whatnot, but like a lot of the day-to-day editorial, a lot of these agents that we have in-house at McKinsey, it will get it 90% there. It's extraordinary. So it's just freed up a lot more of my time to focus on the things that I need to be learning or exploring. So very appreciative of that.
I love that. Nicole, I'll throw the same question to you.
Yeah, I think what's always kind of stayed true for me and in my line of work is the need for a plan. So there's got to be room for both structured and unstructured. So sometimes when you're drinking from the fire hose, like I always am in the startup, you are more reactive versus proactive, but you're always trying to find a way to strike that balance. So what I think, you can say under the category what doesn't work anymore is what goes into the plan, like execution tactics or channels used. That may differ with time, but what's foundational for me is the organization of thought and preparation. It's just super basic.
I love it. And Ivy, you'll have the last word here.
Oh, no pressure, guys. What doesn't work? I would say relying on older tools, especially with the rise of Gen AI. I think technology is always evolving and innovating, and you need to evolve and innovate as well. And in turn, as you learn those new strategy, new skills, it'll, like I said, free up your time, allow you to be more strategic. In terms of what will always stay true, I mean, I think it's such a cliche to say, but I really do think communications isn't a science, it is an art. And you have a level of intuition and instinct that will always be relevant and helpful that AI and technology just can't replace, because it comes with experience and it comes with your knowledge and everything that you have put out in the world. So I that's what I would say is your intuition, your instinct, knowing how to think strategically, knowing how to take all of the components and put it into one in a way that works and resonates with folks.
I love the confidence that all of you bring to this conversation, that you've brought to this conversation, but also clearly into your roles. I feel really privileged to be able to learn from each of you during this conversation. I've learned a lot about the future that you're thinking about, Ivy, when it comes to being more data centric. Nicole, I love that you like to be at the forefront of bold companies and to be challenging the norm and pushing the edge. And Sarah, I think you have given us a lot of insight into how a company like McKinsey actually thinks about working with their clients, but also with your own messaging. So I thank you all so much for your time this afternoon. And to Danny, the entire Highwire team, Ayana, thank you all for hosting this. It is such a joy for me to be able to do this. And I just hope that we can continue the conversation. Thanks, everyone.